Hello, hello. Welcome to podcast 19 of the House Einstein podcast. I am Osman with House Einstein, and with me is Hamish Crab.
Hello, hello.
The working title of this podcast is Behind the Curtain, and we're going to be talking about a lot of the behind-the-scene activity and effort that goes into marketing real estate listings and what agents may not be sharing with their clients, and the range of competence that you see in terms of photography, videography, marketing language, listing descriptions, bad listing photos, due diligence, documentation. We'll cover that a little bit too. We'll actually get a little technical and talk about equipment and editing, as well as in the context of our learning curve in this industry. But before we get started, we have to do our little disclaimer. Yeah. Although at some point, who knows, if this podcast gets large, maybe we'll be, pitching some sponsorship in this spot. But we're not pitching any sponsorship because we're not sponsored. And
by House Einstein.
Well, I guess we are sponsored by our brokerage. That's right. We are sponsored by that. Our brokerage, House Einstein, located here in Boulder, Colorado, is our headquarters with a footprint into the mountains and south to Denver and up to Fort Collins. We are here serving our local real estate community, but we're not sponsored by an outside entity. And I don't know if we ever will. The blog for years, which has thousands of articles and hundreds of a million views. I got to go look at the actual view count. I haven't looked at it in a long time. It might be over 2 million views on the blog at House Einstein. Also, no sponsored content ever, even though we have been approached many, many times since 2005 when I launched the blog. All right, so our actual disclaimer, Hamish. Do you want to give it a try, or should I?
You've got it so down.
You like? All right, you want me to do it. So
I'm happy being echo.
If you are the client of an agent here at House Einstein, please talk to your agent when it comes to real estate advice. That's what we're here for. You can call us, you can email us, you can send us a smoke signal. We are at your service. If you are not a client and you're listening to this podcast, this is 100% entertainment for you and should not be construed as professional real estate advice. And if you're working with an agent, this is also not a solicitation of your business because real estate agents that are realtors are prohibited from actually soliciting the business directly of our colleagues in the real estate industry. There are, I would call gentleman rules, but I guess we can call it gentle person rules in the real estate industry. And while a lot of agents just ignore those rules, we don't at House Einstein. We do everything in our purview and our power to maintain high integrity, ethics, and play by the rules, even if others are not. How's that?
Nicely done.
Did I cover it?
I'm no legal professional, but it sounded great.
Yes. This is not legal advice. This is not financial advice. This is not spiritual advice. In this podcast, we are here to entertain you. And hopefully you find this entertaining and maybe learn something along the way.
Should I get you with a question to start you off here?
Oh, if you want. Maybe I should ask you a question, Hamish.
Well,
I'm going to ask you a question. Since so much of this podcast is about photography and videography, when was your first camera? Tell me about your first. Can you remember the first time you held a camera?
I can remember the first camera I truly had that was my own. And I think I got it from a Discovery Channel store, if I remember correctly. It was maybe 2 megapixels, if that. And it was about the size of a modern DSLR battery, or maybe like 1 inch by 2 inches. It was marketed specifically because it was so tiny. It fixed lens, everything that works. And it only shot photos, and I think it could take 5 photos. So it was tiny. I mean, before then we had like disposables and all those sorts, but I had the tiniest digital camera you could get or something like that.
Your first camera was digital.
Yeah, okay. I get it. I hear the judgment.
I'm not judging you. I'm just amazed that your first camera was digital.
Yeah, so that was my first camera. We didn't get into the film world until I took a photography class in high school, and from there we developed in the dark room, black and white and color. Actually, we got into, which was a challenge, but um, no, I had this digital camera. I had a little lap dog at the time, this like purse dogs. So I had a bunch of pictures of that. I might be able to find a photo from that specific camera, but I think it only took like sub megabyte images. Like you're in the kilobits if you're talking resolution, like nothing. Um, but that was first camera. What about
That's
you?
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I vaguely remember a plastic bodied Kodak, or maybe a Polaroid too. My parents had a Polaroid. These were not my cameras. These were the first cameras that I was allowed to hold and touch.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they were sort of. I remember that they had like a plastic cartridge. The not the Polaroid, but it slipped into the back of the camera, and then everything was self-contained, and you dropped off the whole cartridge to
In the
the photo
roll.
processing place. Yeah, it was like two little rolls in a plastic. It was small. It wasn't 35 millimeter. And
Mm-hmm.
then my mom had a Polaroid, and there's still some shots floating around. Their old photo albums of the Polaroids. But the first camera of significance that I remember, other than, I mean, I do remember the magic of the Polaroid, and the metal body of that thing was so solid. Um, but no, the real first camera I ever was allowed to use was a Nikon that my dad had, and he bought in the 70s. And I remember him telling me that he actually had it shipped to New Jersey, or had the box shipped to New Jersey and kept the camera to save on taxes or something. There was some tax dodge story because they were
Huh.
living in New York City,
Okay.
and New York City had much, much higher taxes. And I don't remember exactly there's some vague memory of a tax story with this, but
For a camera.
the
Yeah.
tax story is not what and I'm not trying to out my dad who's in his upper 70s for a tax evasion in New York City of some camera from the 70s, but these stories are kind of woven together. I just remember this camera being super precious. And in fact, my dad, I learned recently, took it overseas with him and took photographs of my grandparents. And all these photographs have come back into my life because all these negatives, he sent me an album of negatives, and I scanned them in. They are amazing quality, and have so much detail. And so in fourth grade, he showed me how to use the camera, and in fourth grade he let me take it to
Wow.
school with me for what was back then called field day. And I have these photos from fourth grade field day, most of which are composed and in focus. There's even a couple of action shots. And as it happens, we'll do a little show and tell.
They're composed.
um, as it happens, I still have the camera. And this camera, he let me take with me. He let me take it to college, and he's never asked for it back. He's never inquired about its location. I don't even know if he watches uh, this podcast. Dad, I still have your camera. If you want it back,
Oh,
let me know.
cat's out of the
Um,
bag now.
but it has a f1.2 lens, which is insanely fast for something from the 70s, and it's a
Yeah.
55 millimeter focal length. So it's actually really good in terms of its versatility. It still has a glass UV filter on it, and it actually still has a roll of film in here that I don't know when the last time I used this. And the battery actually is still good. The lights light up. So my goal before the year is over is to finish this roll and get it developed. But I remember how substantial this camera felt and how fortunate I was allowed to bring it to school.
Let alone fourth grade.
I I would never ever let a fourth grader handle any of my cameras. he was far more trusting and of me, I think. And maybe that's also part of, I feel like I grew up as a child really quickly, and because he would just let me do things that, like drive a car at 11,
Nice.
not on his lap,
Nice.
like drive on a public street. I don't know, like where, like, as an adult, these things, like, just saying these things out loud seem insane.
Yeah.
As a 14-year-old riding scooters all over our town completely illegally, and then learning how to drive stick and driving my mom around as a 14-year-old.
I
That's
mean,
kind of
you're upstate New York, right? A little small town.
true. Not a lot of people.
That's a good point.
Well, in
Though
any event,
still.
that was camera one, and that really sparked a lot of interest in photography. And I didn't know, Hamish, that you took a photography course in high school. So did I, and I took one after college too at the community college, all involving processing film, actual film, and learning a lot about composition, exposure, the exposure triangle, and really how to capture emotion in photography. That some of my favorite photos of all time are from that period where I took shots and developed them myself. But what's the relevance to real estate? So the relevance to real estate of these stories is that, as everyone knows, there's sort of a cliche of bad real estate photos, and there's even websites devoted to bad real estate photos, and some of them are so horrifically bad that it's just astonishing at the willingness of a seller to engage somebody with such poor marketing ability. So, big picture, photography and videography today is crucial to drive traffic to listings. And it doesn't necessarily represent reality, but there's also a fine line. Like, if you push it too far in the creativity of real estate photos, when people show up, they're disappointed. And you don't want potential buyers, to have a sense of disappointment when they walk in, right? They don't want to be expecting this amazing thing and find out that it's total fiction because you were way too creative with your shot angles and you photoshopped out things that you shouldn't have, and it looks totally different in real life. Back in 2005, when I first started in real estate in Boulder, and I had previously been in real estate in Massachusetts, but 2005 was when I started in Boulder, I still remember running out to Table Mesa and taking a photo of this listing. And I think I put it on the blog, was compare the listing photo with the reality. And the reality was this house was right on the corner on Table Mesa and maybe like 46th Street. And it was right next to the church. And Table Mesa has 4 lanes of constant traffic, especially at certain times of day. And none of that is visible from the real estate photo. It looks serene and perfect. And only by looking at the map will you realize where this place was. Or my photo, I'm like, this is reality. Reality is, this is the dominant feature of this house. And buyers should be really judicious considering buying a home in such a busy location. But can you imagine somebody just looking at this thing on Zillow and like click a button, schedule a showing with an agent that knows nothing about your town or has been in business for a few months or weeks with a fresh real estate license? You're just show me the house. I don't care about the quality of advice I'm getting. I mean, this person wants to meet you, so they're not going to tell you all the problems with it, even something so visible and obvious. But from a marketing perspective, the goal is to show the home at its best possible light and create an emotional response in the viewer, enough so that they schedule a showing. And of course, it has to meet the right criteria: beds, baths, price range. But you only get one chance really to get this photography and videography right, and the listing description right. And so many agents just butcher the hell out of it. It's so bad that and as a team, we've got such a great team at House Einstein. We have a chat, a room where we have dialogue that goes on all week long. And we like to share examples of really bad marketing, but we don't share it publicly because we don't disparage our colleagues. But holy cow, some of it is so bad, it's embarrassing.
Nor do we really thrash on the creator either. We're really focused on the content we're critiquing,
True. Unless we've had multiple bad dealings with a particular agent, we usually don't throw them, even in our private chats. We don't usually throw people under the bus. It's not productive. And we do try to learn, but sometimes it's just so laughable when you see what's in the photo.
And to circle it back to a little bit, Osman briefly mentioned that you kind of only get one shot at these photos or these videos in this listing moment when the listing comes active. And it's almost incidental that you only have one chance, because the resources required to put together this ensemble of listing media is so great and intense. Yeah, you could go back for a reshoot, and yeah, you could go back for other things, but it's at that point it immediately becomes a loss. You have to be extremely efficient when you go in for this listing.
That's right.
You've got to be on top of it. Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good point. So frequently we are pushing against the deadline because we want to get this home on the market. The sellers have done everything they could to prep it. They've hired professionals to clean it up. Landscaping has been done. The windows have been cleaned. It's been deep cleaned and decluttered. And now we're trying to not blow the window for the market. And so we're trying to get it on this week. Maybe next week is a holiday weekend. We don't want to go that weekend. And so we're now shooting photography and videography on a really tight timeline, and having the skills and knowledge to get it done quickly, efficiently, and at a high standard is actually not easy. It's a challenge, which I love challenges. It's like the pressure of time and the pressure of competency required is exciting. This is why I don't understand businesses where you're counting beans. It's very slow paced and measured. I need like some excitement, and this is exciting. To try to get it done and done right. I mean, of course, we'll delay if we have to, but so the price of not knowing how to operate your gear and capture a visually pleasing image and then edit it in post is really high. And I'll add another secret. So well, it's not a secret, but it's just a fact reality, right? So I've invested tens of thousands of dollars in equipment and skills, right? Time and skills is a whole nother add a zero, but equipment alone, tens of thousands of dollars. And it is, it's not, the problem is that when I go on a shoot, I can't do it in 90 minutes. I'm too into perfection. I'm too obsessive with detail. So we hire an outside photographer, a pro, who comes in and shoots our real estate. And one of us, usually the listing agent or Hamish as an associate, will attend, and we will tidy up the house while we are doing this. Because back in the day, up until recently, it wasn't easy to Photoshop out a misplaced item on a table, right? Now it's easy with the new upgrades to Photoshop, but it wasn't easy even 6 months ago. It took time and skill in Photoshop. And being present allowed us to make sure that there was nothing left out. And also, when the photographer watches one of us watching what they're doing, they tend to take their time and not rush through. So we use a pro outside photographer. We usually do our own drone shots. And if we're trying to go for a twilight shot or something really unique for a particularly high-end listing, we might do that as well. So a few years ago, I had a listing on Dewey, and the house had beautiful hipster bulbs on an outdoor lit patio, and the patio was huge. And I was like, it's a 2-car garage with a patio above it. And this beautiful patio on a summer evening is like a key selling point of this property. And I'm not going to get the pro photographer to spend 4 hours trying to get it right. And I came back twice over 2 nights to get those twilight shots, to shoot the same exposure multiple times as the light dims out, and get those lights glowing just the right way. Of course, today I would do the shot a little differently. I don't think it would take 2 nights, but there's no way you can do that.
Because you did it previously, now you can go back, right? Your experience compounds.
20 years of real estate experience and 40 years. How old are you in 4th grade?
Oh, 10? I don't know how old 4th graders are. I'm not from
I think
here.
they're like 10. I think 6th grade is like 12. So I'm going to call it at least 40 years of handling cameras and being obsessed with them. And so now we shoot that type of thing on a Canon R5 with really top quality glass. We shoot a lot of our videography on Sony and Panasonic GH4.
5.
Is it a 5? I thought you had a 4. You have a 5?
Yeah, it's a 5,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, GH5. We're using gimbals for all of our videography. It's our game has changed. So back up a little bit. Why is videography so important? I mean, the difference between a still photo and a moving image is night and day. The level of engagement you get from somebody, you get a lot more actual attention and engagement for a well-produced 60-second to 2-minute video. And a few years ago, we hired an outside pro who was charging us a lot, thousands per video. Eventually, his pricing came down a little bit, but it was really expensive for every single one of our listing videos. That's what we did. And then we tailed that guy for every shot. and learned his techniques and have been practicing in Premiere. And also, one of the reasons Hamish was hired was all of your videography and photography experience. One of the reasons I hired you over other candidates was your level of experience and passion to get this right. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I actually, the other day, remember you asking, like of all during the interview process, you're like, of all things, kind of what would you like to do with video end result? And I remember my answer was I wanted to make a movie. Like that was, I think I even prefaced it by saying, well, it's not real estate, but I would love to make a movie. And I thought that was the wrong answer at the time, but the more I think about it, that really does kind of show the passion and kind of the end result and where I'd like to go with it. The skills won't stop at achieving the goal. I'd like to be able to make the whole cake. And so I think that's really it, right?
Well, I think that's an interesting description. I agree. I love film. And maybe someday you and I will be shooting a movie together. But for now, what we're shooting is real estate content. And just like a film, even it's not, I don't think of it as ingredients. I think of it as mini stories, mini movies, right? Like even a 60-second Instagram reel should have a story. And I'll admit, I don't think that we are killing it. I think we have got a growth curve ahead of us to get even better. So back up. Relative to our peers, I think we're in the top 1% of real estate agents that utilize storytelling, videography, still photography, and social media as distribution networks to drive buyers to our showings and also increase our footprint to attract buyers to our showings, our listings, and also to attract buyers as clients, and all around the mission of helping people be smart around real estate. But that doesn't mean we're done. There's so much opportunity to learn to be even better. And we benchmark the top competitors and the quality of what they're doing and how they're doing it. But we're doing it in-house now. Other than the pro photographer that comes in for our listings, everything is in-house.
And that team chat isn't specifically to rag on poor content. We share amazing content on there and benchmark and rip it apart to see what factors made it great, what could be improved, and how can we do better looking at it.
That's right.
You're referring back to that, yeah.
I mean, it's there's so much, it's one of these funny things. When I find something challenging, I'm very motivated to get into it, right? I want to learn how this works. Like there's a part of my brain that just wants to learn for my entire life and loves it. I've always loved learning. And photography and videography on the surface sounds really simple. Point your camera and click, right? Mm-hmm. You don't need to worry about ISOs and lens focal lengths and all the things, frame rate, composition. Just point your camera at it and click. Yeah. And for a long time, that's what agents were doing with horrible cell phone photos that were really pixelated. At least most agents are no longer doing that, but some still are. But what's surprising is how people that are not into this area, into photography and videography, how they think it's no big deal. So there was an agent on the team a few years ago, no longer part of the team, but she was very dismissive of how easy it is to film and record and was frustrated with how long it was taking to edit content and get it back to her. And at the time we were doing, 2-hour interviews of local businesses, and that was not the right business approach. The idea of that was to really engage our community and also become more than just a real estate brokerage, to really present that we are part of our local community and we support these other businesses, which is all great. But a 2-hour special is insane. People don't have the attention span, and it's not edited. We didn't have time it was edited minimally. It was not like cut. So imagine even Oprah is not doing 2-hour interviews, right? On TV, when Oprah does an interview, it's like 15 minutes for the special that they advertise the hell out of, because people don't have the attention span for 2 hours. But it was an interesting experiment. I just remember, though, how flippant she was about, it's just video, no big deal. And I'm like, no, actually, it is a big deal. We need to get the lighting right. We need to get the frame rates right. And we need to get the audio right. Like it's 2 mics. I need to make sure those channels are set up right. All of this. And then I'm going to sit there while you interview this person ad hoc for 2 hours. Like
And
it's
then you
no,
have recording limits with the cameras too, right?
oh
So
yeah,
like
oh
around the
yeah.
25-minute mark, you got to figure something out.
That's right. That's right. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, we're doing this while I'm trying to grow the brokerage and serve my own clients. And it was like, this doesn't make any sense. But we learned a lot through all of those old experiments to where we are now. And now it's pretty rare for our content to exceed 10 minutes.
Mm.
Unless we're doing like a market update where it's really important to get granular.
Even
Even those are
then,
pretty short, right? We're
yeah.
trying to keep it really short and sweet and produce more content. But all of it starts with what's the story? And the story could be, here's why this listing makes sense. Here's why it's a smart buy. It could be, here's what's going on in a particular neighborhood in terms of sales volume and prices, listings piling up. It could also be just a glimpse. The Instagram and Facebook and YouTube shorts. People want to know we're in the game, so we put out content that shows we're in the game.
Mm-hmm. I'll say the 2-hour interview idea, right? The intention of being out there in a community, showing, not telling, all these things is excellent, right? It's the execution that needs the development, and really all it takes is just continuing, keep making it, and eventually we ended up here.
Yeah, well, the podcast is long form content. And there is a place for long form content. But when it comes to real estate, I think we're in the land of short attention span theater. And short attention span theater means you really got to get to your point in the first couple of minutes and then be done, because people are going to click off if you're not engaging. And then you also have to pay. There's a lot of paying, right? You pay in terms of the skill set, you pay in terms of the equipment, and then once you've edited the content, which itself is a whole nother level of skill set, you need to pay to distribute it, because people own these platforms, and guess what? They want to make money. So it doesn't matter how amazing your video is, unless you are paying for distribution, you're not going to see views on this video that are meaningful. So unfortunately, a lot of sellers, I think, are getting the short end of the stick when they hire an agent that produces a video that is of average quality. And then on top of that, the agent doesn't bother paying for distribution. I mean, maybe they're feeling so tapped out. Well, yeah, it's just on YouTube. Maybe they're feeling so tapped out that they spent $1,500 on the video that they don't want to spend the extra on actually pushing views. But this is we're dealing with content advertising, content marketing. You've got to pay it has to be high quality content, and then you have to pay to put it out. And frankly, the same thing is true for the blog here, or the podcast here. We're seeing a few hundred views from what we can track, but because of how it's distributed, I don't actually know how many views we're getting. We're getting a lot of feedback, which is following exactly the pattern of the blog. The first years of the blog, I mean, occasionally I'd get comments, but mostly it was writing and publishing into the dark. I had no idea if we were getting any business from this. And after about 3 years, the business started to really take off, and continue to grow and take off because of the quality of the content. But it took that long for people to find us and feel comfortable and start trusting us to represent them in purchase and sales of real estate.
For traction to grow, right?
For traction to grow. Much better said.
So
go ahead.
It's interesting. We have a multitude of different media that we can create content within. We've got the audio space, which we're doing with podcasts. We've got the video space. We've got the image space, and then we've got text with the blog. And a typical almost barrier to entry that I think a lot of people feel is this is too saturated. And an example that's easy enough to look at is you just open TikTok, and it's all video for the most part. I mean, there's some strange stuff on there too, but that's the point. There's so many different avenues of content and pieces that there's always going to be something for the audience. There's always going to be an audience for whatever you're creating. We have an arms race in real estate specifically of production value. That's what we're talking about, is when we're benchmarking competition and stuff, everybody's always trying to outcompete each other. So you need to be a little bit more creative. You have to have better storytelling. You need to have X, Y, and Z. And I'm curious what critical mass is going to be in this space as well. Kind of like, where is the top limit? But that draws into what you were saying, Osman, is we need something that catches that viewer's attention. I don't know if you've seen the South Park listing video from Eric Cartman, but it's so stereotypically perfect that when I'm editing our listing videos, I have it playing in the back of my head and I'm like, oh God, I'm using the cross dissolve, and it's like exactly what he did. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to shake something up because I'm becoming the stereotype.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I have not seen that. I also took TikTok off my phone. I
Good.
had it on for a little while, and I found it damaging to my brain. And I found that the algorithm choosing the content for me would result in just. Oh, I mean, this is maybe too much, but I found the content was overly sexualized, and it appeals to the lizard brain. The brain stem that is, you can't turn it off, right? And I'd like to think I'm an enlightened. Yeah, the monkey brain, the lizard brain, the brain stem that controls essential human functions is going to find what it finds attractive. And that microsecond difference was resulting in making me feel gross. Like, why is it one young person after another in bikinis dancing? I'm like, that's good. I'm cool. Plus it's, and this is political, but it's also it's an entity that's owned and controlled by the Chinese government. And the way that TikTok is deployed as a weapon is significant. And a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. The TikTok that they show young people in China and that they shut off, right? You're allowed a limited duration of time, and then you can't access it after certain hours. They don't do that here, right? So it's being used as a weapon. And the weapon, I don't really like where it's taking our brains. So I've taken myself off of TikTok. I think I put a couple of pieces of content on it and stopped. I may reconsider, but at this point, I'm feeling pretty good about ignoring TikTok and put our content on Instagram, put our content on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on what used to be called Twitter, but is now X. I don't know what to call that. So we do have a social media presence. We also have a blog. We also have a newsletter that's being ignored right now and needs to restart. So we're putting content across all of those channels. That's where I feel like 90% of our buyers and sellers are going to be. And the teenagers on TikTok, I'm okay not using for now, just because I feel like it's too
exploitive.
Caustic. It's too exploitive. It's just bad for you.
No, it really is. And I almost think that you're destined to see sexualized content the moment you click male as your gender on the app. There's no way. Like, I've worked hard to get that out of my algorithm, and it still sticks around. So it's just wonky.
This is maybe even more. Maybe we shouldn't go here.
I think we're getting off track. Yeah.
I think I'm going to go there anyway, just for a minute. And I feel like this is related to my approach with my nieces and my friends that have daughters. You will never hear me compliment what they look like, even if they are the prettiest looking young ladies on the planet at any age. Like, they're the cutest babies. I will not comment about how pretty they are in their presence. And the reason I don't do that is because I feel like it creates this sense of identity around what they look like, that they absorb. And I'd much rather compliment their art. I'd much rather compliment something smart they said, or something funny they said, or their physical ability to be a gymnast, or their ability to be lighthearted and playful, or whatever it is, but anything but what they look like. What they look like is sort of undeserved attention that is just genetic, and also creates a damaging dynamic in their psyche. Especially as and this is cisgendered normative talk, but especially as younger ladies get older, and it feeds the beauty industry with makeup. I mean, just the term makeup I find offensive, right? And this is kind of strange, but I feel like, right, what are you making up for? And so the beauty standards become really distorted, and people are spending insane amounts on makeup and cosmetics and plastic surgery and feeling bad about themselves for what they look like. And all of that is rooted in to the idea that what we look like is who we are, and our service to the world and our gift to the world, and our sense of identity and self-worth is wrapped up with what we look like. And the suicide rates have spiked off the charts for young women in particular. And all of that is because of this focus on lizard brain beauty.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if these young ladies are of age to be like, that's the other part, is like, it also is sexualizing young people. And I'm like, that's why TikTok is the most caustic of all the social networks, in my opinion. And some of the others are not far behind, but are better than TikTok.
Yeah. How do we bring this back?
So you got a dose of me rambling, but this is something I believe in. And you get what you put out in the world, and you got to be careful about what you do with your time and where you put your talent. And I'm not going to put my talent into a platform that's that exploitive. All right.
I've got a few things.
All right. Let's bring us back, Hamish.
I can take us to where we are now as far as standardized products of quality and what we do that's basically baked in systems. Right now we have, I can't remember the last time we haven't had a 1-day turnaround on a home tour for an out-of-state client that wasn't uploaded and provided to the out-of-state buyer within the same day as the showing. I also know that all of our listing videos are market update. All of our in-house content is now 4K standard.
Yeah.
And that's just how far we've gone.
Well, yeah, other than this podcast, this is recorded 1080p. But you're right. The vast majority of our content is high quality 4K. Usually 4K 60 that we downgrade to slow it down when needed. And it's all shot on high-end cameras, gimbaled cameras. And it's not just listings. And that's what Hamish is going to, is that as a service to our usually out-of-state clients, but sometimes here too, we will go look at a property on very short notice. Our client can't get there. I'll bring a high-end camera and gimbal, and I'll go through the house, and you'll get my thoughts as we go through the house. And it's not scripted. We're not trying to show you all the highlights and cool things, although those may occur. We're trying to show you what's right and what's wrong. And that's video. I probably have done over 100 of these easy in the last few years. The vast majority of them are not online. They are private. They're for an audience of one or two, the buyers that we represent. Under buyer agency, they've engaged us and they're serious. They're the three things: ready, willing, and able, and they've engaged us. So if they can't get to the house and you or I can get to the house, we do it. And we produce this video. And you'll catch candid goofs and stuff like that in the video. But we just did one for a home in Fraser, and that was yesterday. Our clients are actually local. They are 7-time clients, and they want to buy a property for their family, a second home in Fraser or Winter Park. And so I went up there. It's a 2-hour drive, 2 hours back. Took about an hour and a half of footage that you edited down to 30 minutes or 35 minutes. Maybe it wasn't quite that long of footage, but it felt like I was at the property for almost an hour and a half. And today wrote an offer, and we should be submitting that this evening to the listing agent. So by the time this airs, either it's going to be closed or not. But that video is, it's really interesting because after 20 plus years in this industry, it's obvious when most issues occur. Mold, you can smell the mustiness. Roofs, you could see the weathered shingles. You could see the cracks in the drywall. You could see the wear and tear on the floors. You could see the problems, and you can see some minor problems. You can look at the furnace and see that it's ancient, and the hot water heater has rust on it. Like that sort of stuff we look for. And then we also do a little video on the outside looking for visible and obvious signs of foundation issues, bad grading, and the list just goes on and on and on. And if our clients have specific needs, like we did a few years ago, we had a client that was very, very sensitive to sound, literally have a sound pressure meter, and we're measuring the decibels from the furnace, from the cooling system of the home, to see if that's going to be a problem in this person's office.
The sound travel from room to room. You had me go in and say a few words in the room next door to make sure it wouldn't be too much.
See the sound transfer room to room. I mean, look, that client, a very high-end client, was flying in for showings. Yeah. And it just doesn't make sense to fly in and see a home that we can do a video on, produce that for you, and then make the decision. Do you want to fly in, or do you want to write an offer, because you may need to do so before you fly in, but at least you've got this video of what's right and what's wrong to the best of our ability. There's a lot of caveats, by the way. You're under buyer agency. It warns you that you're responsible for due diligence. We're still doing our best. And I feel like I could sleep at night, because if clients are flying in for a home that has a real obvious problem, I feel horrible. Like, we just wasted everyone's time with a home that was over marketed, and we bought the marketing and didn't do our own due diligence. So
and it's not like we're intentionally trying to sell it, right? Because if this client flies in and the house is screwed up, they're not going to buy it whether or not our video is incredibly positive. So it pays for us to be honest as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we sold a home in Newlands this spring for exactly that way, with a client that watched the videos and then flew in and looked at it themselves and wrote an offer and bought it. But they had us evaluate a lot of other homes, and one of their issues was privacy, because they had a problem with their former neighbor in the town they were moving from, and they were concerned. One of the competitor houses that they were thinking about writing an offer on, they were concerned about how private it would feel at night, and so they asked me to stand on the street at night and shoot the house with the lights on inside. So I'm out there with the Canon R5 and a big lens. I think I had the 70 to 200 millimeter lens. And I'm standing in the street, and I've communicated by cell phone with the listing agent, and they've turned on all the lights and the windows are open and it's dark. And I'm on like 6th Street in Newlands shooting. And this couple walks by staring at me. And I'm like, I didn't say anything. But at the moment, I'm like, I'm going to get the cops out here any minute, because I look like a peeping Tom.
I hope you're wearing a trench coat.
Wearing like black t-shirt and shorts, my normal, Boulder tech routine outfit. I'm lucky I didn't get arrested, but that was actually kind of funny. It didn't occur to me until they walked by and gave me that funny look that I looked like I'm a peeping Tom.
Yeah. The huge lens on your camera too, extended all the way in.
But there's so much you can tell in photography and videography for buyers that are relocating, especially around due diligence. Cracks in the foundation or the brick veneer, grading, furnaces, neighborhood noise pollution, neighbors that are too close. So privacy issues with how the windows are oriented, how the patio might be oriented. And that's really important for our higher end clients. I mean, it's important for everybody, but the higher end clients seem to be particularly sensitive to privacy. And then they want to buy in Newlands, which is like tiny lots, bigger houses, and very little privacy. So it's a big challenge in Newlands to find homes that have privacy. Usually you need a bigger lot to get that, or elevation. A home that's higher up on a hillside is more private typically than one that's lower. So all of those play into it. And all of that we can comment on when we're doing the videos.
Hey, speaking of this particular client, I'm not sure if he still listens. He was listening to at least, I think, the 3rd podcast we re-released. If that's the case, I hope you're enjoying the home, and we need to catch up for dinner.
We have actually been emailing Hamish, and we're talking about a time in September. So when I'm back from Burning Man, we'll pick a date there that works for everybody and then go out to a nice dinner. That's our goal. I really like those clients as well. I like the vast majority of our clients, but unfortunately, because of the deal volume and the busyness of real estate, our closing dinner ritual has been put into and of course, the closing ritual has been on the back burner. I have not done many closing dinners. I used to do them religiously, or that's the right word. Used to do that as part of every closing, and then it just got to be too much. So yeah, we're gonna try to do a closing with those clients. I really like them as well. They're just lovely people, and hopefully that helps welcome them to our community here. Actually, I've got extra tickets, I think, to the Growing Gardens Gala, and I may give them to them because we can't go. I have not told the ED of Growing Gardens yet, because she's hooking me up with tickets as a former board member, but I don't think I can actually go. So note to self, address that. So let's go back to technology and cameras. and frame rates. And let's get into it a little bit. So mostly, Hamish, you shoot with the GH5. Why do you like the GH5?
Personally, I think it's competitive in lens choices. And for the completely uninitiated, you have a few different sensor sizes on your camera. You've heard of 35 millimeter film. That's considered full frame. And then you have crop sensor and micro four thirds sensors. And both of those sensors are smaller than your 35 millimeter sensor. Micro four thirds is what the GH5 has, and it actually has quite a large lens selection and an even larger vintage lens selection. It's an older lens mount system to the body of the camera, and it's also a standardized system. So instead of having a different lens mount for your Canon or for your Sony or for your Nikon, the MFT Micro Four Thirds system is across Panasonic, Lumix is Panasonic, Olympus, and a few other ones. I think Leica's got one. There's a lot of bodies out there that all share this MFT. The MFT characteristics are also quite interesting. If you have a lens that is, say, 24 millimeters for a Micro Four Thirds, it's actually double, because the spacing from the lens flange of the body, and this is getting technical, but bear with me, is
let's keep going.
The spacing from the lens flange at the body to the sensor is, and I don't really understand the science too well at this point, but because of the spacing between these 2 points and the lens, it effectively doubles it if you're looking for like a full frame conversion, which is the typical standard. Huh. So if I have a 24 millimeter lens, which I do, and it's f1.7, it's double all of those values. So I technically have like a 3.4 49 millimeter lens with my Micro Four Thirds. But because of that characteristic, it's a lot smaller, it's lighter compact, and then you have properties within the sensor itself. You have light wells between a Micro Four Thirds and a full frame. That's the typical comparison. So a full frame, naturally, because it's physically larger, will gather more light. Micro Four Thirds, it's naturally smaller. So the properties within these sensors is a little different. A Micro Four Thirds has deeper, what they're photon wells, essentially. So they're able to gather more light information, but not necessarily more a broader area of light. So they're comparable, if not actually a little bit better in low light situations, which you're shooting indoors for real estate photography. You've got, the hipster lights. You've got kind of those incandescent LED kind of copycats, and you can get a little bit more with that. So I see some advantages from that. Really, what it was for me is MFT tech is typically cheaper. It's not flagship like your full frames. And it also had 4K 60, which for me is crucial. We're doing a lot of shots with speed ramping. We're doing a lot of shots where we're really, it's just speed ramping. We're doing a lot of slow-mo, slow to fast motion, and playing around with that a lot. So you got to have 60 frames per second at a minimum so you can pull down your shot. Gimbals can be finicky. Sometimes the shot is only a second long, the little clip that you need for that video, but I can pull it out to a second 40, and that's where I like the Micro Four Thirds space. I like to play in more lens spaces, and there's a Metabones is the brand. They make a speed booster for adapting your Micro Four Thirds to other lenses, full frame lenses. So I know Osman's got a ton of Canon lenses and some really, really, really nice glass.
Well, we as a company have them, and you prefer yours because the R5 is always available to you for professional use, and you frequently choose to stick with the GH5, which I've been like, okay, you're the expert, but the R5 exists for company use, and mostly we use it for still photography, not videos, but the video quality is excellent too. That's and the fantastic. Lenses are amazing, but it is a big, bulky
unit.
I've got it right here.
So
this is a bulky beast, right?
If you're on SoundCloud, I'm sorry, or if you're on an audio-only podcast, but we're pulling out cameras now.
We're pulling out cameras. I guess we're showing off whose camera is bigger in this
it's
image.
You.
It's how you use it, Hamish. It's bigger.
And that's true. So this camera, the lens that I have on here right now is a 12 to 35. But remembering that doubling rule, it's technically a 24 millimeter to a 75 millimeter.
Right.
However,
Well, do
the
you
lens
understand?
is smaller than my hand.
The reason, so the doubling rule is really because you ever take two magnifying lenses and you play with the length between them, that affects the magnification. So where the objective is and where the initial lens is, the distance between the two of those, and then the distance from the flange to the sensor is also going to impact the size of the image that's being displayed on the sensor. That's all.
Same type of principle.
Yeah, it's the same principle. The distance between lenses, the distance from your eye, which would be the sensor, could also affect the image, the size of the image being portrayed. So it all plays together. It's math, it's optics, it's physics.
That makes sense.
But the technology just keeps getting better and better and better. And I got to admit, I'm a little bit of a junkie, from Canon's M50, there's been so many cameras, and I keep upgrading when it makes sense. The latest upgrade was the ZVE10 because it's smaller, it's more compact, and it can easily shoot 4K 60, or even it does 120 and 240, but I think that's at 1080p. But
120 is
still,
4K though.
It is fantastic in its capabilities. So I think we're future proofed for at least a few years with the new Sony edition. But then there's Premiere. There's actually, so this is all the cameras and of course fast cards to get it captured. But then there's the issue of the edit itself.
Yeah. You're segueing over to me. I'm not really sure how to pick this one up.
I am segueing to you. And that's because you've come a long way in your editing skill. I'm coming along too. And I sometimes will throw some fun short videos on Instagram or whatever on my personal accounts, not on the business accounts. But we rely on your editing skills to turn around those videos and get the sequences right, get the cuts right, cut to the music, have it be dynamic and interesting. And the learning curve in Premiere or any editing software is incredibly steep. I mean, I'm sort of laughing at the fact a few years ago I asked our friend Ryan, who's a popular YouTuber here in Boulder, if he would, tell me what I needed to know about video editing. And he just kind of laughed a little. And he's like, look, here's some resources you can go to learn. And I use those resources, and the more I learn, the more I realize how hard this is to get right. And now, many years later, I still feel like our proficiency is better than the vast majority of our competitors, including the ones that are paying for so-called pro content. And it's on par with the best of the best from what I can see. So we've come a long way, but the edit side is just as important, if not more important, than the cool camera, right? Like buying a $4,000 camera and a $3,000 lens, that's great. And we're sticking it on a $1,200 gimbal, awesome. But if you don't know how to shoot and you don't know how to edit, you might as well have just gotten, a toy camera because you don't know what you're doing.
And that's like the folly of everyone, right? There's a huge space on YouTube for just brand new camera reviews. And it's like, I'd watch those forever on end, especially when I didn't have the budget to afford a nicer camera. And I would just dream. And then at some point it dawned on me, I have a cell phone. The quality isn't crazy different. I should just start, and doing it will compound, and it genuinely has. There's a lot of people, I think, that want the latest and greatest, and it's really... the latest and greatest is cool, but I mean, we don't barely use all of the R5's features. That thing is so dense and powerful.
The capability is so far beyond the vast majority of photographers and videographers. And in fact, what's more likely to happen is you're going to get lost in a menu and not sure how to get the settings you want because it's so complicated. And learning the menu systems of both Canon, Sony, and Panasonic is no joke. Like if you handed me your GH5, I'd be like, I don't think so. There's too much to learn with the camera system. I don't know. I know the Canons and I know the Sonys at a proficient level, but I don't know the GH5 at a proficient level. And you're the one shooting on all three, mostly shooting on the Sony, mostly shooting on the GH5. But when I hand you the
Little
Canon,
Sony.
there's a little bit of refresher, like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Got to
Yeah.
find the right menu setting.
You got really mad. I turned off the, you didn't get really mad, but I turned off the touchscreen at one of our shoots. And I didn't tell you. And I think the next day or a few days later, you're like, hey, what's about this touchscreen being off? And I was like, oh, yeah, man, it was annoying. And it just kind of set off the whole thing. No, you get married to a menu system. And that's another thing is when you like are shopping for a camera, you kind of also want to shop for the features that come with that. So like I've always heard kind of there's like an adage, right, where like Nikon was particularly good for landscape and Canon was great for portraits and Sony had a great dynamic range and, you know, like little characteristics that you could attribute to each brand. Where I centered my shopping, at least for the Panasonic, was I wanted lens versatility. And also it was the cheapest camera with 4K 60 in complete honesty. But at the same time, it's excellent. The footage is fantastic.
It's fantastic. Sometimes the eye tracking is not as great. That's the only place I've seen a little weakness. But other than that, it's been rock solid. You've mastered it.
It's terrible eye tracking.
The thing about photography is that when you put the camera on a tripod, you can get great images even if you don't have a great lens or a great camera because you have time for the exposure. But with video, you're shooting 60 frames a second. You need to get enough light into the lens, into the body, onto the sensor so that the image isn't grainy. And the sensor needs to have that sensitivity so that it's not grainy. And then you're shooting at 4K 60 so you can slow it down. You need to have the gimbal motions also practiced and accurate and skilled. And so having high-end equipment for video is important, but less important for still photography. You can get away with a lot wider range. But even I've noticed with my fancy Pixel 7, which is the best that Google can make, and other Apple videos I've seen, they're not very good when the lighting gets bad. They're tolerable on a small screen, but on a larger screen, when you see the video, it's really pixelated or it's grainy. It's not pixelated.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no getting around at this point high-end cameras and gimbals and video editing skill for listing videos. You can get away with it somewhat for buy-side videos and just general lifestyle content. Buy-side videos, we're not shooting for video production quality. We're shooting for what's right and what's wrong. So it's nice when it's actually in focus and you can see what we're talking about. But you could do that with a gimbal and a cell phone, which we've used in the past too. But the usually there's not enough light. You end up with grainy footage.
Osman, I have a package. I need to go sign it. I've got the time code. I'll be right back.
We'll pause.
He just rang the doorbell. I can't believe it. I've been bamboozled. I didn't need to sign. Okay. 156.
No worries. Okay, so
Editing side?
Editing side. If you're looking to get into this as a real estate agent, do not discount the learning curve. And honestly, the best way to learn is probably to go ahead and hire a high-end videography company. You'll spend thousands per video, but you can then watch what they're doing and how they're doing it. You won't learn the edit side, but you'll learn the shoot side. And the more you do video, the more comfortable you get in front of camera. And the more videos you edit, the better you'll get. And unfortunately, because of how skilled this is, I don't think the average agent can do it solo or even with an assistant, unless they hire an assistant that has the video editing and training skill set, in which case it's a huge number to have a full-time staffer that can handle it. It's one of the reasons we're so fortunate to have you, Hamish, because you have those skills and you serve the entire team with those skills. And I'm really grateful for it. And I don't mean to discourage our competition. I just mean to take this seriously. Like this, if you're going to jump into this,
it's an arms race.
It's a multi-year training exercise in getting better. at the production side of video, but then there's the story side, which also requires time and effort to improve on. But I think the payoff is there. That's why we've invested so much in terms of resources to improve our video. So can look for more video content from House Einstein. We've dialed back a little bit on newsletters, but it's unintentional. It's mostly just because we're so busy. And this podcast, frankly, is much easier to record and produce and edit and put out there than the newsletter. The newsletter is a half-day exercise at a minimum. And this is a 2-hour recording that we've hit the topic. Hopefully we've entertained you with some stories. And it's much more digestible. I hope if you're out there gardening, listening to us, or driving in the car, taking a trip, listening to us. All right. So what have we not covered?
This rabbit hole goes so deep, right? So we've talked about kind of our journey onto the path that we're on now. My question, I would say, is, do you think this arms race is ever going to stop? Are we going to have VR listing videos at some point? You know, how would an agent continue to keep making their content so good, especially when this stuff becomes so prolific and everybody can hire the same production company for their listing videos? Is eventually going to become pretty formulaic?
Well, there's some truth to that, and I think AI is going to improve, just like it just did with Photoshop's generative fill feature. It just, took a massive leap, and I think that'll continue to happen for video editing too. But what it doesn't change is the need to work, or the desire for people to work with those they trust, that they like and they trust. And so, I think it's really important to be authentic in what the content you're creating. Like, don't pretend to be something you're not, because it's not sustainable. And when people meet you in person, they're going to realize you're a fraud. Like, they're going to realize it instantly, and you're going to lose trust and credibility. So whatever content you put out, it should really be reflective of who you are, and you should be proud of it. And you should enjoy the process of creating that content to be sustainable and live a happy life, right? Like, if it's miserable for you to produce content, don't produce content.
Absolutely not.
In the game of real estate, we are marketing ourselves. We are out there creating and advertising ourselves, our business, our listings, what our buyers are out there looking for. Video, I think, has some of the highest bang for the buck, but it's one of the hardest mediums to master. But we are continuing to invest massive resources because I think it's so valuable. But don't get discouraged. Get in front of the camera and get comfortable. And that's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm in front of camera right now, and I'm just, I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to the point now where I'm not nervous in front of the camera anymore. I just want it to not be roasting hot or, crazy background noise happening. So what we didn't talk about was sound.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't also talk about drones. So sound, we've invested massive resources into, although it's far less expensive than cameras. We have, you got to have lapel mics. You've got to have mics that plug into your cameras. You can use a cheap plug-in wired mic. It works. But you can't, even this podcast, I'm using a mic that's not that expensive, but the reason is so you guys have better quality sound when you're listening to it.
And your mic was $25 more than mine, and mine has a ridiculous sound to it. I'm so sorry for these listeners, but it will be fixed.
I mean, yeah, well, they're not expensive. So if it's a bad mic, toss it, and the company will buy you a better mic. It's really important to have high quality sound. It's really important to have royalty-free sound that you've licensed for commercial use or royalty-free. Otherwise, you're potentially getting into a lot of hot water as a content producer, as somebody putting out commercial content in particular. And drones, frankly, you need to be licensed, and Hamish is
that's huge.
To fly our drones. And most agents are not, and most agents are also not even hiring licensed drone pilots. If it's for commercial use, you're supposed to be licensed. If it's a small light drone for entertainment, personal use, that's something different.
And I've got a little shill for a big drone here. I didn't believe it until I met you, Oz, and started using your equipment. ND filters on a drone will change the game. The quality of footage you can get with an ND filter on a drone is just leagues above.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like putting on sunglasses.
Mm-hmm.
The detail in the shot is dramatically better on a bright day. And guess what? We live in Colorado. It's mostly bright days.
Yeah.
The ND filters mostly live on the drones. They don't usually come off because they're just necessary. And the same thing, frankly, is true of an ND filter on our cameras too,
Mm-hmm.
because I want to keep the frame rate the same. I
You
don't want
have
to
to have
change
an
the
ND.
ISO.
Yeah.
You have to have an ND. And
Yeah.
we've reached parity on our understanding of that as well. It's absolutely necessary. So the more you shoot, the more you know.
Can I leave, I guess, two things open on equipment since we're talking about it that I think we'll dive into probably towards the end of this year and into next year?
Sure.
I'm looking at a matte box for lenses at the moment. They're essentially a rectangular lens flare, kind of like your tulip or lens hood, and they completely cut out all glare, and then they have a slot for NDs as well. And so there you can shoot directly into the sun, get no lens flare, and have everything you want with your ND filters. And then an additional one, and this is becoming so prevalent, they're also ridiculously cheap, is a teleprompter. There's such an argument for authenticity around teleprompters, though I think they're also really just so integral. You know, there's a reason so many people use them.
I feel perfectly fine with the hood ND filter experiment. I feel a little hesitant with the teleprompter experiment, but at the same time, I think it's worth experimenting with all sorts of technology that can improve our presentation ability. And where I feel our focus is at this point professionally is on the storytelling,
Mm,
because I think we've reached far more than proficiency in our video quality. I think we're in the top 1% of agents in Colorado when it comes to the quality of the video and the quality of the photos that we put out there on our listings. But I think our storytelling has a lot of room for improvement. And I don't think we're bad. I
yeah.
just think that we suck less than most of our competition, right? We could do a lot better. So could all of our competition. But I really feel like this is a huge area where story is even more important than sexy video.
I'll say too, we're probably scratching, I don't know, 10% of this actual industry. You know, we're doing very well, and we'll say that. But in all honesty, there is still so much that we have. I mean, I don't know all of Premiere, and I've been using it for over 5 years. It's maybe 7 years at this point. The depth that this can go is there's room to improve on everything that we're doing. We're by
Yeah.
no
Well,
means, looking back and saying, yep, job well done.
well, that's what you're paying for when you're hiring a buyer's agent or a seller's agent, listing agent. You are paying for competency and experience. You're
Hmm.
paying for advice when the deal goes sideways, when you're in the middle of a negotiation. That's what you're paying for. But the person who's advising you, I think the right skill set is always learning, whether that person's a medical doctor or an attorney or an engineer or a real estate agent, whatever your chosen profession is. I feel like always learning is the right mental framework, or the right stance, if you will. And the curves can be steep, but they're really enjoyable to get there. I remember when I was first sitting in front of Excel in college and asked to put together a chart showing data from a scientific experiment. It was so annoying. And then I found myself in front of Excel constantly in my MBA program. And then when I worked on Wall Street and worked for investment firms in Boston and in New York, here in Denver, and even on Nantucket, constant living in Excel. It's all I was doing and living in Excel. And the speed in which you can analyze gets so fast because you've spent all those months and years of your life in a spreadsheet program
Yeah. No, it all
or in the video
compounds.
editing program,
Yeah.
or as a mechanic working on a car, like you've learned, and you're paying for that skill set in theory.
Yeah.
or not. I mean, maybe you're just paying for a really good looking real estate agent.
I mean, you'd hope for both.
Well, I don't know. I like scrappers. I like people that work hard and the underdogs and overcome, impairments. And not being pretty is an impairment. There's a
Yeah.
whole concept of pretty privilege. And sure, if they're pretty too, that doesn't hurt. But I really like underdogs that scrap or fight for it, and they're the winners at the end of the day. I admire effort. The first time I got a heart rate monitor, I used to be so down on myself because I was like, dang, I'm just not like I'm trying so hard, but I'm not working out. Like I just can't keep up. And then I realized with the heart rate monitor that actually I'm working really hard.
Oh, nice.
And so I need to forget about training to keep up with other people. Because first of all, we're in Boulder. All right. But forget about being in Boulder. Okay. Where somebody's always better and some world-class athletes blowing you by on the trail. But with the heart rate monitor, I actually had something where I could see my effort. And as soon as I could see my effort, I could track it and I could train to the heart rate monitor. But an effort counts. An effort over time is results, especially with discipline and consistency. That's where you get. And when you're interviewing agents, ask them about their approach with videography and photography and marketing. How are they getting your listing in front of people beyond the MLS, beyond what the MLS is doing? What are they actually doing? Beware of scams like private networks that are complete nonsense. They are not just nonsense, but they're unethical and illegal and in a triple regulated framework, yet they're advertising it. Ask questions about those things before you choose your agent. And I hope you found this podcast entertaining. We're now significantly over our usual time.
Let's go.
I think it's time to wrap it up. So if you're looking for us, we're at houseeinstein.com. We have agents focused in Denver, focused in Boulder, focused in the mountains. We represent buyers and sellers. Our mission is to help you make a smarter real estate decision. Hamish, have you got any closing thought to wrap it up?
Nope. If you're looking to create content, just start. That's the first thing. Yeah.
Just start. Just start, and eventually you'll get better. It does get better.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll catch you next time.